The hollow inside? It was the third house Marlon had looked at that week. The real estate market was thinning, and his budget didn't allow much room for being picky. A fixer-upper was fine, he didn't mind putting in some work. What he didn't want was something soulless or sterile. He wanted a place with some history, a sense that people had lived there, not just passed through. That's why 11 Talleridge Lane felt like a gift. It sat just on the edge of the woods, a two-story colonial with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. The listing said it was built in 1904, had original wood floors, and some character, which usually meant it was old and drafty. But Marlon liked that. The moment he pulled up the gravel driveway, he saw potential, not rot. The real estate agent, a woman named Della, met him with a clipboard and a forced smile. "It's been on the market for a while," she said, brushing a wisp of red hair behind her ear. "The seller's willing to negotiate. Very motivated." "Why hasn't it sold?" Marlon asked. Della shrugged too quickly. "People are picky. It's got good bones. Might need a little pest control. Country homes get mice sometimes." He noticed the way she avoided looking directly at the porch. Something about it unsettled him, but he brushed it off. It was old, sure, but nothing a few weekends and some sweat couldn't fix. The house smelled musty inside, like closed-up air and old carpet. The wood floors creaked. The kitchen tile was cracked, but none of it fazed him. It had charm. He saw himself sanding down the trim, painting the walls, filling it with warmth. But then he heard it, a faint scurrying sound in the ceiling. He glanced up. Della must have seen the look on his face because she said, "It's just mice. The inspector found droppings in the attic. Nothing major. You just need to set a few traps and maybe call someone for insulation." Marlon didn't care. It was the first place that felt like home. It was cheap, had no HOA, and sat on 2 acres. He signed the paperwork that night. The first week went by in a blur of unpacking, cleaning, and knocking out cobwebs. He was staying in the downstairs bedroom while he renovated the upstairs, and every night the mice got louder. At first, it was just scratching. Then he started hearing them in the walls, tiny claws scrabbling behind the plaster, almost rhythmic, like pacing. He'd lie in bed at night staring at the ceiling as the noises traveled from one end of the room to the other. He set traps. He bought poison. He blocked the tiny gaps beneath the baseboards with steel wool. It didn't matter. They came anyway. He caught one in a snap trap in the pantry, its neck twisted at a violent angle, tiny eyes bulging. He tossed it into a trash bag and sprayed bleach on everything. But that night, he heard what sounded like dozens of them all around him. He couldn't sleep. He wore headphones to drown them out, but sometimes he thought he could hear them through the music. Then the power went out. He was in the middle of brushing his teeth when everything went black. He spat into the sink and stood there, toothbrush in hand, listening. There were no normal night sounds, no wind, no creaking, just the scratching. Then it stopped. He crept through the hallway with a flashlight, heart pounding, beam flicking across old wallpaper and shadowed corners. In the kitchen, he froze. There were hundreds of mice. They covered the counters, the stove, the floor, just staring at him motionless. None of them ran. Their eyes caught the flashlight beam, glinting red. He took a step back and dropped the light. By the time he fumbled it back on, the mice were gone. Every last one. He called an exterminator the next morning. The man came out in a tan jumpsuit with a vacuum-sealed smile. "It's not unusual," he said, poking around the crawl space. "Old houses, wood frames, mice love it." Marlon showed him the attic. The smell hit them like a wall, ammonia, and rot. The exterminator pulled on gloves and opened the hatch. What they found wasn't just a nest, it was a colony. Hundreds of them, alive and dead, packed into the insulation like a pulsing mass. The dead ones were being eaten by the others. "I've seen infestations," the man said quietly, "but nothing like this." They evacuated the attic, and Marlon paid for the full package: fumigation, sealant, traps, everything. The exterminator promised they'd be gone in a few days. They weren't. That night, the scratching got louder, deeper. It sounded like something big was moving in the walls, something too heavy to be a mouse. At 2 a.m., he woke up to the sound of chewing. He sat up in bed and froze. The noise was coming from the hallway. He opened the door and shined his flashlight and saw a gaping hole in the drywall, teeth marks along the edges. The mice had chewed through the wall. He backed away and slammed the door shut. They didn't follow. Not that night. In the morning, he found his dog dead on the porch. Her name was Bella. He hadn't heard her bark. There was no struggle. Her body was untouched, but her eyes were wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Something had scared her to death. He buried her in the backyard, his hands shaking as he filled the grave. That night, he heard her collar jingling in the hallway, but when he looked, nothing was there. The chewing got worse. Whole chunks of wall disappeared. He tried calling the exterminator again, but the number had been disconnected. The next day, Marlon found another room, one he didn't know existed. It was behind the water heater in the basement, hidden by old boards. When he tore them down, a narrow passage opened up, descending into the earth. It wasn't on any blueprint, no door, no markings, just a dirt tunnel sloping down. He stared at it for a long time. Then, like a fool, he went in. The tunnel walls were covered in scratch marks. The deeper he went, the more he saw bones, small ones at first, bird bones, rat bones, then bigger, cat skulls, dog spines, a child sneaker half buried in the dirt. He turned around, but the tunnel had changed. It was longer now, darker. He heard something moving behind him. When he turned the flashlight, he saw dozens of glowing eyes blinking back at him. Not just mice. Something else? He ran. He nailed boards over the basement door, moved his mattress into the living room, and stopped going upstairs. But the mice came anyway. He stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt them crawling on him, inside him. His skin itched constantly. He scratched until he bled. He found mouse droppings in his toothbrush, his socks, his cereal. Once, he opened the fridge and a dozen of them poured out from behind the compressor, scattering across the floor like spilled oil. Then, the light started flickering. Then the voices came. Late at night, he heard whispering from the vents. Words he couldn't quite understand. It was like the mice were speaking to him, not with words, but with thoughts invasive, foreign thoughts. Stay. Feed. Home. His hands developed a tremor. He stopped leaving the house. He barely ate. Time blurred. Days folded into each other. One night, he woke up to find a mouse sitting on his chest, just watching him. Its eyes were human. He screamed and threw it across the room. It vanished midair. On the 30th day, Marlon went to the police. They sent a wellness officer who walked through the house and immediately gagged from the stench. They called animal control. When they opened the attic again, it was empty. No mice, no droppings, no sign of life. Marlon tried to show them the tunnel, but the boards were untouched. The heater was flush with the wall. There was no door, no hidden passage. They didn't believe him. They handed him a pamphlet on local shelters and mental health resources and left. That night, the mice returned. This time, they didn't hide. They swarmed through the walls like a flood, pouring into the living room in waves. Marlon grabbed a hammer, swinging wildly, sobbing, screaming. He crushed dozens, maybe hundreds, but they kept coming. They climbed his legs, bit his arms, crawled into his mouth, his ears, his nose. He collapsed, choking, body convulsing as they crawled inside him. Then everything went black. When Marlon woke up, the house was silent. He was lying on the floor, drenched in blood and filth, but there were no mice. Not one. He stood slowly, unsteady on his feet. Then he felt it. A hollow sensation in his gut, a scratching beneath his ribs, movement inside his skull. He staggered to the mirror. His eyes were different. Glossy, black, reflective. Something moved behind them. The mice weren't in the house anymore. They were in him, and they were hungry.